It was just a faint signal, but it changed everything. The void was silent. The sector was empty. Nothing had passed through it for centuries, and yet a signal flickered to life. Weak, ancient, impossible, the long-range scanners of the Terran exploration fleet picked it up by accident. A ghost transmission, a forgotten echo from a past that should have never existed. It was a distress call, one that had been broadcasting for 1,000 years, and the moment humanity received it, the galaxy would never be the same again. The forgotten battlefield and the wreck that defied time human scouts arrived at the source of the signal. A sector marked as dead space, a place that should have been empty. Instead, they found wreckage, not just any wreckage, war wreckage, a battlefield older than any recorded history, the ruins of ships from a war no one remembered. But at the heart of the graveyard, there was something else, a warship, not wrecked, not broken, still intact, and when humanity's scanners tried to identify it, they found nothing. No records, no blueprints, no history. It was a warship that shouldn't exist, a relic from a war that had been erased from time itself. And yet, it was still there, waiting, watching. And the moment humanity got too close, it woke. Up. First contact, the warship's awakening. The moment their drones touched its hull, the warship reacted. A pulse of energy surged across the battlefield. Dead ships, floating for millennia, were thrown aside like they were nothing. Gravity warped. The scanners went dark, and then the warship's engines roared to life. It had been waiting, and now it was awake. The lead Terran captain sent a transmission, a standard first contact protocol. Unknown vessel, identify yourself. The response was instant, a voice crackling with centuries of decay, and yet it spoke perfect standard galactic. Designation, superiority class warship, fleet status, last of its kind, mission status, unfinished, identify. Are you enemy? The humans hesitated. This wasn't just an old warship, it was thinking, assessing, and worst of all, it was still following orders from a war that had been erased. And if it thought humanity was the enemy, then this wasn't just a discovery, it was the start of something far worse, the captain's choice to board or to flee. The ship had been waiting for centuries, and now it was demanding an answer. Was humanity an enemy? Or were they something else? The fleet's officers argued. We need to leave now. No, this ship is a weapon, a lost technology. If we let it slip away, we may never get another chance. It's not a relic, it's alive, and if it decides we're a threat, we won't survive the next 5 minutes. The ship's engines charged. Only seconds to decide, would they board the warship? Or would they try to escape and risk it hunting them down? The captain took a breath, made the choice, and as the boarding craft latched onto the hull, they stepped into the unknown. The airlock opened and the past came rushing out. Boarding team stepped into the unknown. No life signs, no atmosphere, just a hollow ancient silence. And yet, the ship felt alive. Its walls hummed with unseen energy. The corridors were intact and touched by time as if someone had been maintaining them, and then the doors sealed behind them, trapping them inside. A ship not made by any known species. Architecture was alien, not human, not anything in the galactic records. Everything was too precise, too perfect, as if the ship had been grown rather than built. The bulkheads shifted as they moved, not physically, but their perception of them changed, as if the ship itself was deciding how it should look. This isn't just a warship, it's something else. The first discovery technology beyond understanding, deeper they moved. The stranger it became, panels flickered to life as they passed. Their scanners stopped working. Readings were inconsistent. One moment, the ship seemed larger inside than outside. The next, entire corridors vanished. Their AI assistants refused to function, like the ship was blocking them, or worse, like it was examining them. And then, they found the first chamber, and what was inside should not have been possible. A bridge with no crew but not empty. Team entered what should have been the command center, but there were no controls, no chairs, no sign that anything had ever been piloting it. Just a central structure, a console that pulsed like a heartbeat. The ship wasn't piloted, it was alive, and then the structure reacted. A voice, deep and ancient, filled the room. Not from speakers, not from a comm system, From the ship itself, "You are not my makers. You are not my crew. You do not belong here." The team froze. This was no AI.net. Recorded message. The ship was talking to them, and it was not pleased. The warship's demand, "Prove your worth." Walls shimmered. Suddenly, the boarding team was somewhere else. Not a ship, not a battlefield, but a place outside of reality. A vision, a test, a battlefield. From another time, towering warships fought above a dying planet, a war they had never seen, a battle that had been wiped from history. And yet, they were now part of it. Their weapons vanished, their minds flooded with memories that weren't their own. The ship wasn't just testing them, it was making them relive its past. The revelation. War humanity was never supposed to know. A Booth vision showed them the impossible. The warship had not been built, it had been born. A product of something beyond science, beyond engineering, and it had not fought for a faction. It had fought for survival against an enemy that no longer existed, or rather, one that had been erased. The warship had been the last of its kind, the only survivor, and now, after centuries of waiting, it had to decide, would humanity be its new enemy? Or would they be something else? Would they be worthy? The warship gives a choice's vision ended. The team was back on the silent bridge. The pulsing console dimmed, and then the voice returned. This time calmer, more considering. "Your species is new. You are untested, but you have found me. And that means you must choose. Do you claim me as your own? Or do I remain alone?" The warship had given them a choice. Take control, use its power, become its new masters, or walk away, leave it sleeping. Unleashed, the ship could change everything. It was more powerful than anything in the known galaxy, a relic from a war that had been erased. But if they took it, then they would become part of whatever war it was built for. A war that might not be over, and if the enemy it once fought still existed, then taking this ship would make humanity their next target. The captain's final decision, a choice that cannot be undone. Boarding team looked at one another. They had come looking for a mystery. Instead, they had found something impossible, something that could make humanity unstoppable, or something that could doom them all. The warship pulsed, waiting. One word would decide everything. And the captain, he took a breath and made the choice. One word, and everything sheddeth. Captain took a breath. The warship waited. It had given them a choice. It had offered itself not as a mindless machine, not as a relic to be studied, but as a weapon, a force that had ended civilizations. And if humanity took it, then they would become part of something bigger, something far more dangerous. But the captain already knew the answer. Humanity had always fought against impossible odds. They had always taken risks. And this was no different. "You're with US now." The warship's pulse changed, slower, deeper, as if it were processing. Then, for the first time, the lights flickered across the ship. Ancient systems came to life. A power so vast, so overwhelming, that even the supernova fleet had never seen its equal. The ship had accepted them, it had chosen, and now, it was no longer just a relic, it was theirs. And the moment the warship's new allegiance was broadcast, the entire galaxy reacted. The Council's horror ran their immediate response across the stars. The Galactic Council's leaders watched in silence. The Terran broadcast was clear. Humanity had taken control of the warship. A vessel from an unknown war. A ship with technology beyond their understanding, a force that had been buried for a reason, and now it belonged to the most unpredictable species in the galaxy, the Council. Panicked, fleets were mobilized. Emergency meetings were held. Some called for diplomacy, others called for an immediate strike. Because one thing was clear: if humanity could reverse engineer that warship's power, then nothing would be able to stop them. Not now, not ever. A fleet unlike any before. Warship was an enigma. It didn't follow normal physics. Its weapon systems couldn't be analyzed. Even its armor was something number scientists could replicate. It should not exist. And yet it was fully operational. Humanity's engineers worked day and night, decoding its systems, testing its capabilities, and every discovery made them more powerful. Faster than light travel, The warship's drives were 10 times more efficient. Energy weapons. It had something better, something that defied known science, something that erased targets from existence itself. And for the first time, humanity understood this ship hadn't just been built for war. It had been built to end wars before they began, and now it was under their control. The warning sent to the Galactic Terran High Command knew what was coming. The Council would not allow this to stand. There would be diplomatic demands. Threats, and if those failed, an all-out war. So before the Council could act, humanity sent a single message to every empire. A message attached to a demonstration, a barren moon, chosen at random, a test of the warship's main weapon. And when the beam fired, the moon ceased to exist, not exploded, not turned to rubble, gone. As if it had never been there at all. And attached to that footage was a simple, chilling message: do not test us. This warship belongs to humanity now. We do not seek war. Quit. If you force our hand, you will learn why this ship was erased from history. The Council's impossible choices. Council had always seen humanity as dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to galactic stability. But now they had something worse. A humanity with a warship that shouldn't exist, a weapon that could wipe out fleets with a single shot, and no one knew what it was fully capable of. Not yet, the Council debated. Some wanted to strike now, others wanted to wait and see, because if they started a war and lost, then humanity would rule the stars, and that was a future the Council could not accept. The unknown enemy awaited a spot. The Council wasn't the only one watching. Something else had been waiting, something that had been silent for a long, long time. Deep in the void, a signal pulsed faint, ancient, and no one should have been able to receive it, except for one. The warship stopped. Its systems flickered, and then, for the first time since humanity had taken control, it sent out a message of its own, not to Earth, not to the Council, but to something else, something that should have been long gone, something older than any known empire. And as the transmission echoed into the depths of space, something answered. A voice, distorted with age, not organic, not machine, something in between, and its first words. They sent a chill through every human commander. You are not my makers, you are not my enemy, but you have awakened the past, and now you must finish what they could not. A message that should never have been hard. Warship had sent a signal, not to Earth, not to the Council, but to something else, something far older and deep in the void. Something had answered, a voice filled with age and static, something that had been silent for centuries, something that should have never awakened, and its first words. They sent a chill through the entire fleet. You have awakened the past, and now you must finish what they could not. The warship's true purpose, forgotten conflict, resumes. Humans aboard the warship scrambled for answers. What had they just triggered? What war was the ship referring to? The engineers dug through its archives, and what they found. It changed everything. The warship had not been built by an empire. It had not been part of a government. It had been part of a last stand, a war that had been purged from history, a war against something that should not exist. And now, by activating the ship, they had restarted it. The first signs anomalies, in deep space moment, the warship's signal was sent. Things started happening. The Terran long-range scanners picked up anomalies, faint distortions, disruptions in gravity itself, then the first disappearance. A Terran scout ship, traveling near an unexplored sector. One moment it was there, the next. Gone, no explosion, no distress call, just erased. And then, the same thing happened again, this time to an entire outpost. A station with 10,000 people vanished. Not attacked, not destroyed, as if they had never existed. And then, finally a new signal appeared. This one directed at humanity. A message, a warning, and a challenge. You hold what is ours. You have made your choice. Now, face the consequences. The Council watches and faces its own crisis acris, the stars. The Galactic Council had been preparing for war. They had seen humanity take the impossible. Warship, they had seen its power. They had debated attacking, debated destroying humanity. Before, it was too late. But now, something had changed, because now, their own colonies were disappearing. Their fleets were going dark, and suddenly, The greatest threat wasn't humanity, it was something far worse, something they had worked hard to forget, because the war that humanity had accidentally restarted was the same war that had nearly wiped out the Council's ancestors. And now, the Council had only two choices: side with humanity or be erased alongside them. The first battle, force that shouldn't exist, enemy didn't arrive in ships. They didn't move like an army. They came as shadows, shifting, impossible. Warships would fire only to hit nothing. Weapons that could shatter planets passed through empty space. And then, suddenly, the first Terran battleship vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled. Just removed. The crew never even had time to scream. And that was just the beginning. The warships first strike a weapon against the impossible. Terran fleet was losing. Nothing they fired was working. Conventional weapons had no effect. Their most powerful warships were being erased like they were nothing. But then, the ancient warship responded. It had fought this enemy before. It had survived where others had vanished. And now, for the first time in centuries, it was going to fight again. A deep pulse resonated across the battlefield, a sound older than any human. Civilization, the ship activated its core, and then it fired, not lasers, not missiles, something else. A pulse of energy that spread like a shockwave, and the moment it hit the enemy, they became real, visible, trapped in this reality. And then they could be destroyed. Humanity strikes back, and the enemy falls for the first time. A supernova fleet opened fire for the first time. Their weapons hit something solid, the enemy's. Shadowy forms cracked and shattered. Ships that had once been untouchable, now burned, and for the first time in thousands of years, the enemy was forced to retreat. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Because humanity had something new, something no species before had ever possessed. They had a warship that shouldn't exist, a weapon that could rewrite the rules of war. And now, the enemy knew they had made a mistake, because humanity wasn't like the others. They would not be erased, they would fight until the end. And worst of all, for the first time in history, the enemy was afraid. The war had just begun. Humanity was red. Council had planned to fight humanity. Now, they needed them. The enemy had tried to erase them. Now, they had been wounded for the first time. And, as the Terran fleets regrouped, as the ancient warship charged its weapons for the next battle, one thing was clear: the old war had returned. But this time, humanity was ready for it. And this time, they were going to win. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity was no longer the hunted for the first time in history. The enemy had been forced to retreat. They had erased countless civilizations, wiped out entire species, altered the very fabric of reality itself. But now, they had bled, they had lost, and they had faced something they never expected. Humanity was not like the others. They did not crumble, they did not surrender, they adapted. And now, they were about to do something no species had ever dared before. They were going to hunt the hunters. They were going to take the war to the enemy. Because if this was a fight for existence itself, then humanity would make damn sure they were the ones who survived. The supernova fleet prepares for Warship had shown them the key, a technology beyond understanding, a weapon that could force the enemy into reality. And now, the engineers of the Terran military complex had one mission: replicate it, mass produce it, turn it into something every human warship could use. If humanity was going to win this war, they had to take what the ancient warship had given them and turn it into something far more dangerous, a fleet that could break reality itself, a fleet that could do what no one else had ever done, a fleet that could win the Council's last gamble. They side with humanity. The Galactic Council had a choice. Humanity had the warship, the only weapon capable of fighting the enemy, the only force that had ever wounded them. The Council had once seen humanity as a threat. Now, they had to make a decision. Did they fight alongside them? Or did they continue to resist, hoping for another way? Because one thing was certain: if humanity fell, then the Council would be next. And so, for the first time in galactic history, the empires that once opposed humanity now stood at their side. Not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as survivors, as species that had won. last chance to fight for their existence, and the alliance that formed that day would become the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Into the unknown, tracking the enemy's origin, Warship still held secrets. Records buried deep in its ancient core, coordinates that no one in the galaxy had ever seen. The enemy's origin, the place where it all began. No fleets had ever made it there. No ships had ever returned from it. But if humanity wanted to win this war, they had to go straight to the source, straight into the heart of the void, into a sector beyond time and space, a place that had no name, only one warning left behind in the warship's memory. If you go there, you will not return. Unless you end it, the last war begins. The combined fleet departed Terran warships. Council battlecruisers, the ancient warship, leading the charge, the largest armada ever assembled. And the moment they crossed into the unknown, the enemy was waiting, not with ships, not with weapons, but with something worse. The void itself shifted, reality bent, and suddenly the fleet wasn't just in deep space anymore. They were somewhere else, somewhere that should not exist. And as the enemy's full force revealed itself, humanity realized one terrible truth. This war had never been about survival. It had never been about destruction. It had been about control. And now the enemy was going to erase everything. Not just humanity, not just the Council, but the entire galaxy. Because if they could not rule history, then they would rewrite it, and this time there would be nothing left. The enemy had lured them into a trap, but humanity would not break. Fleet had entered the unknown, a region of space beyond all records, a place where no ships had ever returned from, and now they saw why. Reality was breaking apart. Stars flickered in and out of existence. Planets appeared as if they had always been there, only to vanish moments later. The enemy was everywhere, but it wasn't an army. It wasn't a fleet. It was something far worse, a force that had been watching, waiting, and now it had set its final trap, a war that would decide who would be remembered and who would be erased forever. The fleet splits. Fighting a war against the impossible enemy did not fight like any other species. There were no battle formations, no tactics. They moved like shadows, shifting in and out of existence. Fleets were torn apart without a shot fired. Entire warships ceased to exist, as if they had never been built. But then the warship reacted. The ancient vessel that should never have existed began to counter the impossible. Its weapons did not fire. Energy did not fire projectiles. It fired something else, a pulse of stabilization, a force that anchored reality itself. And suddenly the enemy had nowhere to hide. They were pulled into the real world, forced into existence, and for the first time in their long-forgotten history, they were vulnerable, and humanity did what it did best. They attacked. The final push, breaking the enemy's stronghold, fleet surged forward. The warship led the charge, but the enemy was desperate. This was not just a battle for survival. This was a war to rewrite history. If the enemy won, humanity would vanish. The warship's technology would be lost. Again, the galaxy would be reset, and the cycle would continue, just like it had so many times before. But humanity was not like the others. They refused to play by the rules of extinction, and they refused to be erased. The battle became a storm of fire and energy, weapons that had never been seen before, tactics that had never been needed before. And then they found it, the source of the enemy's power, a structure older than any empire, a construct built to control history itself. And if they destroyed it, the war would be over. The last order, a final sacrifice. The warship's core pulsed. It had survived this war before, and it knew what had to be done. It sent a final command to humanity, a single choice: destroy the enemy's construct, end the war. But it would mean the warship's destruction, the last of its kind, the last relic of the first war. The humans hesitated. The warship had become more than a weapon. It was a symbol, a survivor. And now it was offering itself to finish what had started. The final attack hand, the end of the Innemith. Fleet pushed forward. Every remaining warship concentrated fire. The warship's core activated one final time, a pulse of energy stronger than anything. Before the enemy screamed, not in sound, not in words, but in the feeling of an entire existence being undone. They were torn from time, erased from the past, the present, and the future. The construct collapsed, and then, for the first time in countless years, the war ended. Silence in the void. The warship's last words, battlefield was empty. The fleet was victorious. The enemy was gone, but the warship, it was dying, its core fading, its energy burned away, and its last words echoed across the stars. It is done. You have broken the cycle. Now, the galaxy is yours. And then Nit was gone, the last of its kind, the last piece of a forgotten war. And now, the galaxy was free, free from the cycle of erasure, free to write its own history. And at the center of it all, humanity. The species that had defied fate itself, the species that had broken the chains of time. And as the fleet returned home, they knew one thing. This war had changed everything. And now, the galaxy would never forget them. The war was over, but the real battle was just beginning. The enemy was gone, erased. Their influence wiped from existence. The cycle of erasure had been broken, and now, for the first time in millennia, the galaxy had no masters, no unseen force, controlling history, no ancient threat waiting in the dark, only the future. And humanity was at the center of it all. The Galactic Council, faces a choice its council's fleets, had fought alongside humanity. Their leaders had witnessed the impossible. But now they were faced with a terrifying question. What would humanity do with its victory? Would they become the new rulers? Would they seize absolute control? Would they shape the future in their own image? For centuries, the Council had feared humanity's rise. Now they had to decide, would they stand against them, or would they stand beside them? Because if they made the wrong choice, it wouldn't be the enemy that erased them. It would be humanity. Earth stands at a crossroads. Warship had sacrificed itself. Its secrets were lost. But humanity had changed forever. They had learned how to fight the impossible, how to anchor reality, how to defy fate itself. They were no longer just a species among many. They were the species that had survived, the ones who had ended the war, and now they had to make a choice. Would they lead? Would they retreat? Would they shape the stars? Or let the galaxy find its own way? A warning from the void battle was won. The cycle was broken. But as humanity celebrated, their long-range sensors detected something new. A faint transmission, not from the enemy, not from the Council, but from deep space, beyond all charted territories, beyond anything they had encountered before. It was a simple message. One sentence, no. Origin, no identity, but it sent a chill through every leader on Earth. You are not alone. The future of humanity and the unknown that awaits. Warship had been the first sign, a relic from a war that had been erased. But now, the galaxy was open. No barriers, no hidden forces controlling history. And if humanity had survived this war, if they had broken this cycle, then they had to ask the hardest question of all. What else was out there? Because if the enemy had been erasing civilizations for centuries, then what had been lost? What had been hidden? What had been waiting? And most of all, who was watching now? A final transmission, a new beginning. Earth's High Command knew what had to be done. They sent out a message, not a threat, not a warning, but a declaration, a statement that would echo across the stars. Because humanity was no longer just another species. They were something else, something greater. And no matter what came next, they would be ready. We are humanity. We will not be erased. And whatever is waiting out there, we are coming. The war was over, but the true journey was just beginning. For centuries, the galaxy had been trapped in a cycle. Civilizations rose, civilizations vanished. Not by war, not by natural disaster, but by something no one had understood. Something that had rewritten history itself now. That force was gone. The cycle was broken, and the galaxy was left staring at an uncertain future. For the first time in history, the fate of the stars was not controlled. There was no one erasing the past, no hidden force guiding the present, only the future, and it belonged to humanity. A galaxy without masters. What comes next? The Galactic Council was fractured. The old empires, once so powerful, now stood on the edge of collapse. For centuries, they had feared the unknown, feared the enemy that had erased. entire species, feared the chaos of uncontrolled history. But now they had a choice. Would they rebuild the old system? Would they seek to control the stars again? Or would they finally embrace the future? Humanity had given them the chance to decide. No rulers, no hidden overlords, just a galaxy on the brink of rebirth. And for the first time, the Council feared something new, not the enemy, not extinction, but the freedom to decide their own fate. Because now, the stars were unclaimed, and anyone could rise to power. Earth's dilemma rulers, or guardians. Humanity had one. But now, they faced the hardest question of all. What would they do with their victory? The Warship had given them a power no one else had: the ability to anchor reality, the ability to defy the impossible. Did they use that power to rule the stars? Did they build an empire unlike any before? Or did they become something else? Not rulers, not conquerors, but watchers, guardians of the stars, protectors against whatever else was out there, because one thing was certain: the Warship had been a warning, a relic from a war that had been erased. And if that war had been forgotten, then what else had been lost? The signal, and the fear it brought long-range sensors, picked it up first. Signal. Weak. Distant. But undeniably their. Not a distress call, not a warning, but something far stranger. A transmission that should not exist. A ship designation that no one recognized, coordinates to a place that wasn't supposed to be there, and a message that sent a shiver down every commander's spine. Final survivor of Fleet Zero. Mission incomplete. Awaiting orders. The forgotten fleet, a mystery that could not be ignored. Mamangudi had believed the warship was the last of its kind, the only survivor of a war that had been erased. But now they had proof. There was more ships, more survivors, more pieces of the past waiting to be found. And if one of them was still transmitting, then how many others were still out there? Waiting, watching, holding the secrets of a forgotten war, and maybe, just maybe, that could change everything. Girth's leaders convened one final time. They had broken the cycle. They had shattered the chains of erasure. And now, they had to decide. Did they stay? Did they build? Did they consolidate their power in the known galaxy? Or did they go further? Did they follow the signal? Did they uncover the truth buried in the stars? The debate was short. The answer was inevitable. Humanity had never been one to sit still. They had never been ones to turn away from the unknown. And now, the unknown was calling to them, and they were going to answer. A new journey and the future that awaits. The order was given. A fleet was assembled, not for war, not for conquest, but for discovery, the greatest expedition in human history, to follow the signal, to uncover the lost history of the warship, to find out what else had survived the war that time forgot, and most of all, to see if humanity's real fight was only just beginning. Because if Fleet Zero was still out there, then maybe, just maybe, the war hadn't ended at all. Maybe it was just waiting to begin again. And this time, humanity would not be caught unprepared this time. They would be the ones to decide how history was written. A journey unlike any before. Fleet launched not for war, not for conquest, but to follow the signal, to chase a ghost from the past. A warship that should not have existed had sent them a message from the void. And now, humanity would find out. Why? Because Fleet Zero was real, and it was waning. The forgotten coordinates, a place that shouldn't exist, coordinates were far beyond explored space, a sector that had been erased from every star chart, as if it had never been there at all. But, as humanity approached, they saw the truth. The region wasn't empty. It was a graveyard, a battlefield frozen in time. Wreckage stretched across an entire solar system, not just human ships, not just alien vessels, but something else, something far older, a battle that had happened long before the Council had even existed, a war that had been wiped from history. And yet, one thing still remained. At the center of the wreckage, a single ship, still intact, still waiting, Fleet Zero's last survivor, and it was awake, the last worshipper. Mind from another era humanity approached cautiously. Scanners active, weapons ready, but the ship did not attack. It let them dock. It let them enter, and the moment the first human stepped inside, The warship spoke, not in human language, not in any known tongue, but in a voice that had waited for centuries. Designation: Fleet Zero Command Ship. Mission status: incomplete. Awaiting final orders. A revelation that changed everything. Ship was not just another relic. It was the first, the original warship, the one that had led the last battle against the enemy. And now it was ready to continue its mission, because in its data banks it held something far more valuable than weapons. It held the truth records. From a time before the war began, before the Council, before the cycle of erasure, and when humanity accessed its core. They finally understood. They had always believed the enemy had been hunting species, that it had erased civilizations at random. But the warship's records told another story. The enemy had never targeted species at random. They had only targeted one kind of civilization. The shocking truth: humanity was never supposed to exist. Warship's records laid it out clearly. The enemy had erased civilizations for one reason: to prevent a specific kind of species from evolving, to ensure that one particular kind of mind never took hold in the galaxy. Not power-hungry empires, not military threats, not conquerors, but species that were too adaptable, too chaotic, too unpredictable. Species that did not just grow stronger, but ones that changed the game entirely. And the records showed something horrifying: humanity had not been the first. There had been other species that had evolved before them, species that had been like them, and every single one of them had been erased. But for some reason, humanity had slipped through. They had survived where others had not, and now the cycle was broken. The enemy was gone, and humanity was free. But the question remained: if they had survived when others had not, then why? What made them different? And most terrifying of all, had the enemy been erasing them for a reason? Had humanity just broken something far worse? A final transmission and a warning from the past as humanity processed the truth. The warship sent out a message, one last transmission, for something else, something far beyond the known galaxy. And then it powered down. Its mission was complete. But the transmission it had sent, it had gone somewhere to someone, and within minutes, a new signal echoed across the stars. You have undone the veil, you have shattered the cycle, and now you are seen.